Okay,
So are you going to be asking questions, or you just want me to ramble?
a little bit of both.
Okay.
So, yep, you're in good frame. So let's start with, could you tell me your full name?
Gregory O'Neill Grant.
Could you spell that for me, please?
Gregorio
And where were you born?
right here in the Sugar City, Savannah.
What date was that?
2 August 1948.
So when you, how would you say that? How would you say that you identify yourself? Would you say that you're black? Would you say that you're African American? Would you identify with a particular culture?
No, I'm African in America.
Okay. So, you said you're originally from Savannah.
Yep.
So, what was it like growing up in the area?
Compared to today, there's a lot of changes. One, I'll just say like where we are. When I was in high school, this particular site did not exist. This particular college, as what it was, did not exist. There was an Armstrong, but there was not a Armstrong Senior College. It was Armstrong Junior College. And that particular college was on Bull Street on the north end of Forsyth Park. And then it later moved here. I went to a completely segregated school system. I am a product of 16 years of education in Savannah, 12 years of public schools, 4-year BS degree in electronic engineering technology from Savannah State. So I'm homegrown.
So you mentioned that Armstrong, as it existed, used to be a junior college.
Yes.
Could you tell me what exactly do you mean by that?
They did not offer baccalaureate degrees. They will only offer associate degrees. Then if you wanted to get your bachelor's, then you would have to go to one of the other 4-year institutions. The highest thing you could get was only 2 years. That's the equivalent of a junior college now.
So, where did you get your bachelor at?
I got my bachelor's from what is now Savannah State University. At the time, it was Savannah State College.
Okay. So, what were some of the most memorable events from your childhood living in Savannah?
It's Halloween. It's kind of funny because like right now where we are, with the COVID backup and everything, a lot of ships and everything are off the port, off the coast. And the big thing I heard a couple of weeks ago is the stores are going to run out of costumes and hurry up and get your costume. We didn't never buy costumes. My little group, we made costumes. In my little group, we would always get our mother's dress. And we would take out her dress and turn around backwards so that the part that opened would be in the front. Now, growing up in our neighborhood, the big no-no was having your candy bag stolen by the big kids. We never knew who the big kids were, but we knew who the big kids were. The big kids were the older brothers of some of our friends who thought they were too old to go out trick-or-treating. So their fun was go around snatching the bag from the smaller kids. So what we would do is, the reason we would have the dress turned around backwards is that we would have a pillowcase pinned to the inside of the dress. And that way we would go to about 2 houses and then we would empty the bag into the pillowcase. So if our bag got stolen, you didn't lose but a house or 2 houses worth of candy. Our all-night stash was in our safe. So that was like one of the things I remember. We walked to school. Luckily, where I lived, I'm from the Can Park area of Savannah, which at the time was roughly 2 blocks away from Beach High School, where I graduated. My first elementary school was the Wren Elementary at the corner of 52nd Street and Hopkins, which was about 6 blocks. About third grade, they opened Harge Elementary on the corner of Victory Drive and Hopkins. I was about 3.5, 4 blocks away. So we had what a lot of people are trying to get right now. We had community schooling in that we could walk to school all 12 years, and it was right there in our neighborhood. So that, those are some of the things that's unique about me growing up here in Savannah.
So, what can you tell me about some of your family members?
Well, I am, out of my immediate family, I'm the first to go to college. I am the first to graduate. My parents did everything they could to make sure I, as we say in the culture, so I could become who I could be. Education-wise for them was probably somewhere around 6th to 9th grade. And my father was born and raised in Savannah. My mother is from Bullock County. And I spent my summers going in between the two places. A lot of times, a lot of my knowledge of non-city stuff I got from spending my summers in Bullock County. And originally, and it's kind of funny because one of the other hats that I do wear is that I'm a genealogist. And with that, I do know quite a bit, or have found quite a bit about my mother's family in Bullock County, as well as finding more about my father's family, who originated in Darlington County, South Carolina. That's one of the places. So it's just one of those type of things, just growing up. My father was one of 5. My mother was one of 6. So, it's combined family. And like I said, they did everything they could to make sure I had the best, that I never wanted for anything. And one of the memorable things is that even today, I think back about situations that happened when I was growing up, whereas there would be times there wouldn't be quite enough food in the house. And my father would come home from work and say, I had a hard day today at work. Y'all go ahead and eat. I may get something later on. And then I would notice that, now I noticed that he didn't eat it all. I ate. Or other times my mother would sit there and say, well, I've been cooking all day. I've been smelling the food. I've been tasting the food all day. I'm not hungry right now. My father and I would eat, but I ate. So they sacrificed for me. And I think I would like to say I probably paid them back. When I graduated from Beach High School, I sent off an application to enroll in the University of Miami in Coral Gables. I was accepted. I went to Coral Gables. I was all the way through the registration process, all the way up to where I had to pay my money. And common sense. I don't say I became a man, but I started thinking like an adult. I stopped thinking about myself because I realized then my parents had gone through a lot of trouble to make sure that I had the money to enroll. And I truly was not serious about going to school. And I did not want to waste that money. So that particular day, I went on campus. I actually went all the way to the building to pay. And I turned around. I walked off campus, walked across the street, went to a Burger King. And this is during the time when Burger King had a ham sandwich, which was the size of the original Whopper. I got a Whopper, I got a Whaler, which is the large fish sandwich, and I got that ham sandwich. I ate all 3 in one sitting because I knew I was leaving and that was going to be roughly a 12-hour bus ride. So that way I would not have to worry about getting food on the trip. And I left Coral Gables and I walked into the house 3 o'clock in the morning and I almost got shot. Because there were only 3 keys to the house. 2 keys were in the house. The other key, as far as my parents knew, was in Miami. So we don't know what's this coming inside the house. And I let everybody know who it was. So, and like they say, as Paul Harvey used to say, and the rest of the story, you know. So those, you know, like you say earlier about some of the things I remember about growing up and some of my most memorable. And the reason I say that is because I realized that my parents were struggling and they were going to make sure whatever I wanted I could have. Why waste the money when I at that time did not really was serious about school. From September to January, I worked odd jobs around the city. I think one of the jobs I had was that I worked on the corner of 40th and Bull Street. There used to be a grocery store called David's, and I used to work stock there. And I did that up until time to enroll for January classes, and I enrolled in January classes at Savannah State. And stayed there for roughly 1.5 years, 2 years, until Uncle Sam decided that he needed me. And of course, for me to, once again, that was to show I needed not to have been in Miami, I lost my deferment. Why? Because I wasn't doing my work. So.
And what year was that?
That was in 1968. It's kind of, let me see. Yes, it was 1968. That was my late. Actually, that is like pretty much for the most part the last time I really lived in Savannah. I have been away from Savannah longer than I have lived here. And when I went into service, I spent 4 years in the Navy. I came back here for about 3-4 years, finished my degree, and I left in January of 1978, and I've not been back. I've lived, across the country.
Not to derail us too much, but you mentioned that you have been doing a lot of genealogy work.
Yes.
So what are some of the things that you've discovered about your distant ancestors in the?
For Black people doing genealogy, we have a little hiccup at 1870, and the reason for that is years prior, we were only an age, a color, and a sex on a census. So you really could not identify. One of the truly hardest things to do was when you realize that some of your ancestors were enslaved. The big question is, who enslaved them? So one of the big things out of, I have found out who enslaved my mother's family in Bullock County. I know who enslaved part of my father's family in Darlington County, and I know who enslaved my family in Colleton County, which is Walterboro area. So.
Would you mind telling me what family that was?
Okay. My mother's family name in Bullock County is Goodman. There were only 1 or 2 Goodman families, white Goodman families in Bullock County. And it's not necessary that, it's a misnomer that a Black person's last name normally leads back to the person who enslaved them. Many times that's true, but that's not always the case. In my case, it just happened to be true. Uh, I found out from a Freedmen's Bureau work contract that was signed January the 1st, 1866, roughly 7, 8 months after the end of the Civil War. My great-great-grandfather signed a contract with John Goodman to remain on the property where they were living. So that was my suspect anyway, John Goodman. And John Goodman, right now today in Bullitt County, their house is still there. It is on Mud Road right across from, and I get this part mixed up, whether or not it's Upper Black Creek Baptist Church or whether or not it's Lower Black Creek. But anyway, the house is right across the road from that particular church, and that's the Goodman. That's who enslaved my mother's family. My father's family, who came out of Darlington County, they were enslaved by a gentleman named John Nicholas Williams. What's unique about him, his father was one time the governor of South Carolina. They were enslaved on the Plumfield Plantation. And that's right there in the big metropolis of Society Hill, South Carolina. And that's where one of my great-grandfathers came from, Society Hill. And he married a lady from Ridgeland, South Carolina, whose father was a Civil War veteran. He was in the 128th United States Colored Infantry out of Hilton Head, who was enslaved in Walterboro. So he would be my great-great-grandfather. His mother, my great-great-great-grandmother, were enslaved by a gentleman by the name of Frederick William Frazier there. He's known as Captain Frazier. Now, the one little clue. I said he enslaved my great-great-grandfather and my great-great-great-grandmother. Frederick William Frazier is my great-great-great-grandfather. So that's where some of my Scottish blood comes from, because he's Scottish. And with his family, we can go back to the very first person, which is also a John Frazier. The only question is no one really knows when he came, where he was born, or who his parents are. And that's the big hiccup there. The next big surprise I found, the old question is, if you don't want to know the answer, do not ask the question. I had a DNA hit because I took Ancestry DNA, and I thought this young lady was a first cousin because my granddad, you remember the Temptation song, Papa was a Rolling Stone? Well, by today's standards, my granddad was a player. And I thought this young lady was related to one of these children that he had that we don't know about that came up. And we got to talking for a while, and I found out that her father, not her father, that her family came from Jacksonville. Oh, no, she said they came from Florida. And I made the statement, I wasn't sure whether or not my granddad had ever been to Florida, but I knew my dad used to live in Jacksonville. And when I said that, she said, I'm no longer interested in talking to you. So I left it alone for a while, months. There's an old television show about a detective that used to come on that used to always wear a trench coat. His name was Columbo. All of a sudden one day I was sitting at the computer and my trench coat came on, and I started looking. And come to find out, instead of her being a first cousin, she's a half niece. And her father is actually my brother. So but they do not want to contact or communicate. So, I've tried. I like the old saying, I can bring the horse to water, but I can't make him drink. So I brought him to the water, so I left it at that. So that's genealogy 101.
Fascinating.
Yeah, yes.
So, getting a little bit back on track to the Savannah area. So, what were some? You mentioned Halloween was a fun pastime growing up. What are some other fun things that you did while growing up?
You have to realize that at that particular time, you more or less stayed in your community. Like I say, I was from the Can Park area. Where I lived, I could come off of my front porch, run straight across the street, and I was at the basketball courts on Can Park. So our little group more or less stayed there. Christmas time, we would get up 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And I had to laugh. I'm gonna change the subject a little bit now. I had to laugh this morning. I was standing there at the mirror and I was brushing my beard, brushing my hair, and I looked down and I noticed I had on this red shirt. And I'm like, darn, there's Santa. But anyway, we would get up, our kids, we would get up 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and we would start running back and forth from the houses. And we were running and making noise just like it was 12 o'clock in the afternoon. And not realizing probably many of our parents were just getting in bed. And here we are getting up. So the big thing on Christmas morning for us at Can Park is that we all got a brand new pair of roller skates. The roller skates that we got were called Union Number 5. And we all wore the skate key around our neck, and we would go to what we call the skating ring. Actually, oh gosh, what is it? I think it's, oh gosh, I can't remember the name. I never knew it had a name until probably in the last 10 years. There's a park that is in between 44th Street and Victory Drive, in between Florence and Burroughs Street, right near Butler's Presbyterian Church. And what this park was, it had a border sidewalk all the way around the 4 sides. You had a two cross sidewalks through the middle, and in the middle was a circle. And for whatever reason, we called that the skating ring. That's where we spent our mornings or our day, skating all day. And when I think of Savannah and growing up, that's just one of the things, I really remember that stands out greatly, is just going there and skating on the parks. We would skate so long that when we walked home with our skates off, our foot would probably come up about a foot, because we had been having those heavy skates on all day, and then we take them off, and now our feet are so light that, your feet just bounce. So it's a real good time.
So, what were some of the what were some of your favorite things to eat when you were young?
I know I got in trouble because we had steak once, and I told my parents I didn't like steak. And of course I had the discussion, you don't like steak? There are people in the world that wish they could get steak. Yeah. So I didn't go that way. Oh gosh. My mother had a dish that I am finding out after I got older. It's basically a West African dish, and she would cook red rice, and she would have bacon and shrimp and stuff in there, occasionally crab meat. The equivalent dish from West Africa is called jollof, which is a one-pot meal and it's basically the same type of thing that's cooked with red rice and everything. That was one of my favorite. My mother baked a lot, so one of my favorite pies from her was sweet potato pie and occasionally peach pie. And even to today, there's something I care about that most people do not like. I love her fruitcake. I'm a fruitcake eater. And so that was one of the things. So like on Christmas morning, the first thing I would do would be get up, and I could have coffee then. I would get up and have a cup of coffee. My mom said I never knew how to slice cake. I would always get me a hunk. I would have that, and I would put an orange in one pocket, an apple in the other pocket, and I was out the door, going to the skating rink. So those two things, those stand out, and all of her seafood, pretty much. I enjoyed.
So you mentioned before that in your period in between graduating high school, not going to college in Florida, and returning, you mentioned you worked as a stock
keeper, yeah.
What were some of the other jobs you had?
Growing up, the very first job I can remember, and it really wasn't a job, I was probably more of a pain, but at the same time, I kind of helped the gentleman. At one time, milk delivery in Savannah was done on the front porch. I remember the horse-drawn cart, and the milk would be in the back with ice put on top so it'd stay fresh, and the water dripping, and it was unique that the driver could get off the cart, and the horse knew when he got off that he would walk no more than about 2 houses and stop, because when the driver got off, he had just enough milk to go to 2 or 3 houses, and then he'd come back and they would do it again. I got on there with him while he delivered milk. And there were times like he would give me the quart of milk and I would run up and put it on the porch and stuff. I didn't get paid, but it was just something to do.
What year was that?
Oh gosh, this was in the 50s, probably around from 55 to 60. There was a time on 44th Street, on the odd side of the street, in between Stevens and Hopkins, there was a little drugstore they call a Sundry. And I went there for a little bit to deliver packages. Because people could call in for their prescription and stuff like that, and you would have home delivery, and I was one of the delivery person that did that. That was in that era. Then when we left and moved, the big thing we did, which is pretty much what everybody did during the summer, was you got a lawnmower, a gallon of gas, and you walked the streets cutting grass, cutting people's lawn. And that was the biggest thing that I did, as far as work. I never really worked outside of the house or anything, but just right there in the community. I hadn't thought about that in a while.
So what about after you finished, presumably retired from the Navy?
No. I spent 3 years, 11 months, 26 days, and 2 hours in the Navy. And I went into naval aviation. I tell people I was in the Navy. I was not a sailor. I never went on a ship out of 4 years. I was part of aviation, and all the airplanes that I worked on, my major airplanes I worked on, none of them had a tail hook. If you do not have a tail hook, an airplane for the most part cannot land on an aircraft carrier. And when they land on an aircraft carrier, a lot of people do not realize you're slowing down, coming, And just as you hit the deck, you take the throttle and push it full. So in case your hook does not catch the cable, you have enough power to continue to take off. If you catch, you can feel it and you pull back. So actually a landing on an aircraft carrier is actually no more than a controlled crash. And to me, that's the reason why United States Navy, United States Marine Corps pilots are the best in the world. Because Air Force can't land on a carrier. And what's unique about that is, first of all, finding that little dot in the middle of the ocean, then landing there at night. So you have to do everything that you did during the day, you got to do it at night. So it's very trying.
So what specifically was your job in the
Navy. My rate was AT, which is Aviation Electronic Technician. I was to work on the electronic boxes in the Navy. You had an AT and an AE. AE is electrical. They worked on from the battery to getting there, and we worked on the boxes itself, depending on what it was. That was I was grouped in. After schools, after A school, which is, I would say pretty much like going into a technical school after. I got that classification, trained on that. When I left, uniquely, I went to boot camp in a brand new boot camp that had just opened in July of 1968. I got there December of 1968. I was in Company 45 of the original companies of 45. When I left Orlando, I went to the technical school, which is called an A school in Millington, Tennessee. And, why do you go to aviation school in Millington? That's on the Mississippi River, and, but anyway, that's the Navy for you. And when I graduated there, then my first real orders to the fleet, as we say, I went to San Diego at Naval Air Station, North Island. And I have to say I got a cush job. I was the youngest member of the Admiral's personal airplane. The Admiral that I was command of was called ComNav Air Pac, which is Commander Naval Air Force Pacific. So he was in charge of all naval operations in the Pacific Fleet, or the Pacific area. And because he was on call 24 hours a day, we didn't have to stand duty. So I didn't do any watches. Well, for whatever reason, I got kicked off the crew. And what was unique was that I had to go to the leading chief of our division. He was on the telephone talking, and when he got off the telephone, he was in a chair like this, and he just leaned back, and he was just looking at me. And I'd made up my mind, I'm going to the brig. I don't care I had gotten to that point where I did not care anymore. I said, when you say something funny, I'm coming across the desk. And then he asked me to slowly turn around. And I slowly turned around, and when I got back facing him, he said, I don't see a thing wrong with you. And I wasn't expecting that. He said, as a matter of fact, I wish over half of the base was as neat as you are. What was happening is on the Admiral's crew, I could get a haircut on Monday. Wednesday, I was being told I needed a haircut. And my commander got very picky. I know why it happened, but he became very picky. He wrote me up in such a way I should have been court-martialed for insubordination just from the way it was written up. So the leading chief looked at me and he said, I see what this is. He said, I'm gonna give you a job. And it's not a job just to carry you over until your time is, transfer. It's gonna be a meaningful job. And then he looked at me and said, you stay on the same watch bill, which is your extra duty where you have to take watches at night. You stay on the same watch bill that you're on right now. And I sat there and smiled because I wasn't on a watch bill. So the whole time I was in San Diego, I never stood a watch. And the job that I did get, I was out of my area because I was doing statistical work in the headquarters building. There's a program that I worked on that I initiated that I found out later got 2 crewmen on the East Coast sent to Leavenworth because some shenanigans it did. What I was doing was the A-7 Corsair aircraft. I was tracking every A-7 in the Pacific Fleet. Not only was I tracking every A-7, I knew every squadron that they were in, and I knew the serial number of every black box on every aircraft. So I was running the maintenance up and down of not only the aircraft, but of the squadrons. And it became a program that went Navy-wide. I won't say I developed it, but I was, I nursed it to life. So that was the program I did. And then when I left there, then I went to Japan. And when I was in Japan, the squadron I went to there, many people in the Navy know nothing about. And it was just that this squadron was sort of like the Masons. The Mason will sit here and tell you is, we're not a secret organization, but we do have secrets. And our squadron, we weren't hiding, but we had secrets. And what happened there was I went into an area that was called special projects. I was outside of our normal electronic shop that repaired the electronic boxes. We made equipment. The crews will come off of a mission and they'll sit there and say, we need a piece of gear to do this or do that. We had a civilian engineer. He drew up this schematic and we built it. We tested it. We installed it. And we just made the special equipment. And that was, my time in service. So that I truly, truly loved. I loved that part. Japan wasn't bad either, but that part was really good.
So in total, how long were you in the Navy?
Legal terms, 4 years. But like I said, 3 years, 11 months, that is getting closer to the actual time. I went in the Navy on December the 30th of 68. I got out of the Navy December 26, 1972. So, 1972, 4 years later.
So does that time include your working with the not secret division?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That was all that whole time in there.
So what did you do after leaving the Navy?
I got on I bought a motorcycle in Japan. I rode for a while. I had, at that time, it was a 650 Yamaha. And I rode a lot. And there was a young lady I was dating who was in school, and she politely told me, classes start in January and you will be in line. You will be registering. And I looked at her like she was crazy. January came, I registered. We were no longer together, but I registered. And like I say, about 2.5 years later, I left there, and I don't know if you ever heard of the Manhattan Project? You know a lot about it? Kind of, okay. Well, I left Savannah State and I went to one of the main sites of the Manhattan Project. I went to Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And that was one of the legs in the building components of those things that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So I was there for about 13 to 15 years working there.
Building components for fascinating.
Well, not from there. I mean, yes, there. At first, I was working in a calibration lab, which we calibrated and maintained all the equipment that was being used in the plant. I decided I did not want to stay in that area. I probably could have stayed there and retired from there. That I wanted to be more in line with what I'd been trained to do, which was in the engineering field. And I asked for a transfer, and I was transferred into the assembly division, of which where I was a senior engineering assistant there. And just working in the assembly building process.
Manufacturing components for nuclear devices.
Mm-hmm.
And you worked there for, you said 13 years?
All total about 13 years, 13 to 15 years. And I left there because my mother was getting ill here, and I wanted to get a little bit closer to her. And the closest that I could get was Kings Bay. So I went from making to delivering. And when I went to Kings Bay, I worked at Lockheed. And I was electrical engineer there on the cranes.
And this was what year?
Oh gosh. That was in the late 80s. Around 89, 90, someplace in there. I was there in the Navy, and in there's something that's called a plank holder, which means you were there from the beginning. I am a plank holder of Kings Bay Naval Subbase. I was there when the base was a construction site, and I was there when it was turned over to be a production site, an active site. So that's the reason why we got the plank holder. And what happened was Lockheed is notorious that when they're in construction site, we'll just say for the sake of argument, this room may hold 20 people comfortably. Lockheed, so make sure we get what's finished here, they may hire or bring in 60 to 70 people in this room to make sure it's that. So once it went over, then they just start cutting. And I was one of the ones that was ripped. And I left there. And well, I was ripped. And so I had it rough there for a while, because at that particular time, it was doing that during the 90s, in and out of, are we in a depression, are we in, type of thing. And people, there's a saying that's kind of one of those tricky questions when you apply for a job. And one of the things they said, do not lie on an application. Okay? But how do you get I'll just use the term, how can you be a clerk, salesperson in Walmart, and they sit there and say, oh, you have a BS degree. And what they know is you're just here for the moment, and as soon as you get something else, you're gone. Okay? If I don't put in there I have the degree, I'm lying. So if I don't put it, they hire me, they find out I have, oh, you lied on your application. So there's that catch-22 type of thing, and I had a lot of that happening during that period of time. So basically overqualified for jobs that I was trying to do, and so I went quite a while without work. And when I did start working, worked at the post office for a little bit as a temporary. That was a mistake. Then worked at then I went back to the post office as another job. I used to carry mail. I was a carrier in St. Simon. That was a bigger mistake. And then I worked at a cabinet company where we were installing cabinets in homes and businesses. It was different. And then because of one of my hobbies, I got hired for a job working with youth. And that's where I ended up working with youth for the next probably 15 years after them.
So why do you say the post office jobs were a mistake?
Yeah.
Why?
I don't know if you remember, there was a time, if I told you, came in here and I told you I'm getting ready to go postal, the reputation of just those words, that, it was a lot of uneasiness. When you went through orientation, I'm giving you orientation, and I'm gonna sit here and tell you is that do not ever argue with your supervisor. Do not ever argue with or talk back to a supervisor. What's his name?
Blaine.
Blaine works for you. You told Blaine to go out to Science Drive. So he's going out to Science Drive. I am a supervisor. As soon as he gets to the door, I tell him to go to Krispy Kreme. He can't sit here and tell me, well, I'm going, because that's arguing. Now he goes to Krispy Kreme, come back. Now you're upset with him because you told him to go to Science Drive. And when the first night I got home, I told my wife, I said, there are two things I already have found out. I understand why there are so many shootings in the post office, and the fragile do not drop that you put on packages don't mean nothing. And I'm not talking about the people, just the machinery, how it at times can cause packages to fall and drop and get destroyed. And that was at the post office. Now, that was as a mail handler. Later, when I became a carrier working there, it wasn't bad. But what happened was the postmaster and I were not on the same page. She had two females that she was protecting. She knew as a veteran working with the government, the minute I was hired full time, that I could buy back all the military time that I had, and that would be my seniority. We just say they had been there 3 years. If I come there and I get working, my 4 years, now I have 4 years seniority. I'm ahead of them. So she was trying to protect them to get them to a point that they were not in competition. So they didn't hire me. The day I was let go, your speed has increased, your accuracy has increased, people on your route like you, we don't need you. And then I realized that the person who had that position just before I did was another veteran. Can we prove it? No. So you just went on. And that was, like I say, the real big mistake. But, hey, you live in and I left there, and then I started, like I say, working with youth down in Jacksonville, at-risk youth. And the reason I got that was I used to be an archery instructor. I used to teach archery and one of my fellow archers who had taken the course with me, he called me up one night and said, can you teach a class for me? I said, where is it? He said, in Jacksonville. I said, yeah, I could do that. And I called the place, and when I went down, the gentleman had a after-school program for kids. And after I got there, he just sat there and started laughing and said, you're not going nowhere. You're staying here with us. So he hired me. And I worked there for a few years, and I worked around Jacksonville, and left there, and I back and forth again, in and out of different jobs till I got to the point where I can't stay down in Camden County no more, and that's when I moved up to Liberty County, and I started working. I don't know if you're familiar with Gateway. It used to be right there at 301 and 84, right there where the Parker's is now, and it used to be a flash food gas station, Exxon, over here, and right behind on 301 was a little gray building, and we had an after-school program there. And I went there and worked for 3 years, and I left there and went to working with what I call alphabet kids, EBD children, emotional behavior children. And I started working with them in at a school called Coastal Academy in Hinesville, and I stayed there till I retired from there. And like I said, the rest is history, and I ended up here.
So I understand that as you have brought in to demonstrate that you're quite knowledgeable about sweetgrass sewing, I believe it's called.
Sewing, yes.
Sewing.
Thank you for not saying weaving. And the reason I say that, other people don't have no problem with it being called a weave. I don't weave. Weaving is when you interlock over and under like that. Sewing, part of what I do is that I get a piece of saw palmetto and I shave it down to make a needle and thread. And the last time I realized you use a needle and thread for sewing. So I'm a basket sewer or a basket maker, yes.
So how did you learn that?
We have a cultural museum in Riceboro called Gitchikunda. There is a gentleman who became a brother, a mentor, very good friend, who was from the island of Sapelo. He lived in Atlanta, and he was a basket maker. And he could not find any relatives or anyone on the island who wanted to learn. He came to Gitchikunda, and he started teaching there. And at one time, we had probably more basket makers there at Gitchikunda than the whole state of Georgia had. And his name was Herbert Jerome Dixon. And Jerome, like me, was in the military during the time of Vietnam, and but he was a full combat vet. He was a door gunner on a Huey in Vietnam, and he ended up becoming an ancestor from Agent Orange. And he was the one who taught me. And so he wanted to make sure what he learned did not die. So and I took it up. When he passed, the owner of Gitchikunda, who is also an ancestor now, Jim Bacote, he came up to me and he said, I don't want to give you a big head, but out of all of us, you're the best. You have to start teaching now. So that's where I got this from. And what is kind of unique, this basket here is called the Zulu beer basket. The Zulu women, when they make beer, they will pour it in a basket. When I first made this basket, if I was out, I would take a bottle of water and pour in there, and maybe a drop will come out. But because I have done so many different demonstrations and stuff out, it is dried off now, really dried. So if I pour water in here, it runs out just about as fast. It would probably have to swell up again and get swollen for it to hold. But this is called a Zulu beer basket. What's unique about this basket, when Jerome passed, this is the basket I was working on. And he never got to see this basket. So I will never get rid of that one. This basket, what this basket is used for, this is called a fanner basket or either a whittling basket. This particular basket is what it's used for is the reason why so many of the Africans were taken from West Africa and brought between southern North Carolina to northern Florida, because they had the knowledge of rice. Once you took the rice out of the fields and you cut it, you would put it on a big sheet and you would use a frail, which is a long stick that has a piece of rawhide with a smaller, maybe like a foot stick on the end, and you would swing. And what you're doing is beating the rice off of the stalk. You would collect the stalks, throw them away, take that up, and then you would take those, what you got, and put into a molar and pedestal, and you would sit there and you would separate it there. You would take that out then and put here, and what you would do is throw up and down. What you're doing is separating the heavier rice from the lighter husk, and it would blow away, and the rice would come back here. And this is, like I said, this is a fanner basket or a winnowing basket. This basket is a very unique basket in the sense that all of my baskets, the moment I make the last stitch, I will sign it, put my name on it. This particular basket has two names. It has my name here, Vera Manigault here. Vera Manigault is one of the top basket makers of South Carolina. Vera Manigault started this basket. I finished it. So this one basket has both a South Carolina connection and a Georgia connection. Now, why is that so unique? Okay, the grasses that are used in South Carolina, they pull. The grass we use in Georgia, we cut. They sow with the new growth of the cabbage palm. We sow with the limb of the saw palmetto. But we all do the African coil basket because we all go around in a circle to make our baskets. What is the difference that's our major difference between the two styles. What is the difference between the baskets of the Southeast and the baskets of West Africa? Selection of material. Because once they get the material, they sew in a round coil. Now, one of the main differences that I have seen, in America we have to, or at least I was taught, that you will hold the basket here and you sew on the inside going clockwise. Every time I see a West African sew a basket, they are on the outside sewing and they go counterclockwise. But no difference. And the baskets were basket making. I'm going to use this as an example. Wood carving, metalsmith in the form of a blacksmith, and net making. Those are 4 of the arts and crafts that the ancestors brought with them during the Middle Passage that we are still doing today. So this is a cultural and a heritage thing that we're doing, and that we have to continue teaching.
So you teach people how to make, how to sew baskets like this?
On the most part, I show people, and you have to convince me. And what you have to convince, I can't tell you. I really don't know what it is, but then I have to see whether or not then I actually start teaching you.
Okay.
Because there are little nuances that I include in teaching that is not what I show you. What I show you is 100% everything I do. But there's that big word, but. So that's the difference. I have no problem showing anyone, but I'm not going to teach everyone. And it's almost like an apprenticeship. In Japan, the sword maker, you were an apprentice, what, 5, 6 years before you got off the anvil, beating? And it won't be that long, but it's that same type of mentality. You have to show me that you really, really want it, that you're going to respect the culture. And that's why I say the difference in teaching and showing. I'll show everybody. So. Oh, and also, this is, I'm proud of this also. This is a historical basket. This particular basket, the Zulu beer basket, is one of 2 baskets that represented the state of Georgia in President Obama's 2nd inaugural parade. This particular basket was on the float, the Gullah Geechee float, in representation of Michelle's heritage, who comes from Georgetown, South Carolina, which is a Gullah community. They had a Gullah Geechee float, the 2nd float in the parade, and this particular basket was on the float.
So other than to maintain the culture and hopefully get people interested in the culture, is there any other reason that you make these baskets?
Believe it or not, it is soothing. Because once you start working, you just go. On my very first basket, I asked Jerome, I was working, I said, when do I come up? Because I was making the flat part at the bottom. And he sat there and told me, he kind of laughed and said, the basket will tell you. Basket will tell me. So I just kept on going. And I sewed and sewed. And all of a sudden, I just got this feeling, go up. So I started breaking the walls up. And I got to a point, and he said, stop. I said, you finish. And I'm sitting there looking at my first basket, and Jerome looks at me and said, your first basket looked better than my first basket. I look at him and said, I just had a better teacher than you did. So, but it's a cultural thing. It's a way of remembering the ancestors. It's a way of respecting them. It is a type of spirituality of that connection. So I guess that's the reason why I continue doing it.
So it was also mentioned when I was discussing with the person organizing the interviews to begin with that you are very familiar with herbal remedies.
Yeah. One of the things that happened, just like when the ancestors came, they brought a knowledge with them. In this knowledge, they cured and healed themselves. When the ancestors got here doing enslavement, The number one European way of treating illness was bloodletting. And the ancestors said, time out, no. So in a lot of the places where they were held, they refused to go to the white doctors. And in most villages and what happened in a lot of the farms where they were kept, they started having someone who had the knowledge of the medicine. And a lot of times they would just go out and get certain things. Why it became so stuck on me, I don't know. But I did not realize when my mother was teaching me or saying things, I was actually listening. One of the very common herbal medicines in the South, in the Gullah community, is this plant right here. You have any idea what this is called? There's a little animal that has very long ears, has a little bunchy tail, kind of hop.
Rabbits?
Okay.
Rabbit bush?
Yeah. This is called rabbit tobacco. It has two other names. It is called rabbit tobacco. It is called life everlasting, and it's called life lasting. Other than washing the dirt off of the roots of this bush, just like you see it here, you put it in a pot, steep it, and drink it as a tea. You drink it for colds. Luckily, when I was growing up and my mother made me drink it, I was allowed to put a sweetener in it. In the culture, it is said if you drink rabbit tobacco without a sweetener, it's like drinking it barefoot. That's the way it tastes. Just think of your old socks that you steep in. And when you smell it, the smell is pretty much the way it tastes. Now, I can take these leaves right here, crush them up, roll them into a ball. If you have a toothache, put it over that tooth. It'll help ease the toothache. A lot of people who were raised in the country, this was their first cigarette. I remember my mother telling me that she would get some rabbit tobacco, and I'm gonna ask you a question, and I'm not trying to play on your intelligence, but I've asked this question and many people did not know what it is. You know what a brown paper bag is? Okay. They would roll it up, put it in a brown paper bag, had to go behind the barn because if they got caught smoking it, their butts was going to be as hot as the end of that cigarette because they won't get their behinds wet. And this would be a lot of people's first cigarette. But you can take the rabbit tobacco and smoke for asthma. Because it has the name everlasting, life everlasting, life lasting, a lot of people will drink this daily as a tonic, as a rejuvenant tonic. So you have the life everlasting. I went to Jessup this morning, and I know there's some on 301. There is a little plant that grows about yay high. The stalk of the plant is very green, and it has a little yellow head. I have seen where this plant is called bitterweed. I knew it as feverweed. They would take that plant and steep it as a tea and make you drink it. And what was unique about it was that it has quinine in it. And quinine helps reduce fevers, and which is a real good taste too.
That must, presumably you'd have to drink that with sweetener as well.
Yeah, not necessarily. There is a medicine a commercial medicine that I had to drink as a child for colds. Are you a religious person? Do you know the significance of the 366, 666? That was the name of the medicine, 3 sixes. And it was, excuse me for saying this, you've been out playing ball all day. You have not had one drink of water all day. And when you first go to the bathroom and urinate, you can imagine the color. That was the color of 3 sixes. And I don't ever remember drinking any with a sweetener.
And it was predominantly quinine in it?
Yeah, predominantly quinine. Now,
Sounds incredibly bitter.
yeah, yes. That was another one of the medicines. You ever had acne, blackheads? Ask someone who has it, do they want to get rid of it? You know how to get rid of acne and blackheads?
How?
When you get up in the morning, what's the first thing you usually do? First thing?
Shower and brush
No,
teeth?
before then.
Stretch.
Or after you scratch. A lot of people urinate. Okay, instead of putting that urine in the toilet, collect it. Wash your face with it. Then you can take your bath in. But the first thing to touch your face is that urine. I told one of my students that, and it was about 3 months later, he came up, Mr. Grant, it worked. Okay, what worked? I've said a lot since then. He said, I tried urine. And his face was as smooth as this table.
Are there any other uses traditionally for urine?
Okay. You ever heard of pink eye? You know what pink eye is? It's conjunctivitis. If you look up urine, it will sit there and tell you the use for urine is for conjunctivitis. About 3-4 years ago, I got pink eye. And at the time, I was not working around children, so the only place that I knew I got it from was, and I'm gonna tell you right now, when you go in the grocery store and they have those wipes, wipe your handle, because I think that's where I got the pink eye from. It was a Friday afternoon. It was about, it was probably about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I was beginning to get the itch. I hadn't started getting the red, and I was getting the crust. And I was upset because I realized I had pink eye. So I was getting ready to make arrangements to go to one of the walk-in clinics, and it hit me, you're always telling people to use urine, and you going to the doctor. So I went and collected my urine. Now the first one I used was, I'll be honest, was 50-50. And I just washed my eye out. And every time I urinated after then, it became purer and purer and purer to where I was using nothing but pure urine. 24 hours later, I had no crust and I had no itching. And that's all I used was urine.
So, when I was a child, my great-grandmother suggested this exact same thing, and everybody around was like, I don't know, that'll never work. Apparently it does.
Yes. There's an ailment, there are 2 ways of doing this. You ever heard of thrash? Babies getting thrash? One of the treatments with thrash is take a urine-soaked diaper and wipe that baby's mouth out. That would get rid of it. Now, in the culture, it is said that if the person who can do this could not have seen their father, is someone who has never seen their father. That person can either suck it out or talk it out, and they would remove it from the baby. So,
Do you know why that was
no,
the specific circumstance?
I mean, it's just that uniqueness, whatever it is. I don't know. There's a tree that's very common in Savannah and around. The leaves look a lot like a maple tree leaves, but this particular tree has a little green kookaburra in the summer, which is the little seed pod. That tree is known as a sweet gum. When the little kookaburra is green and soft, you can mash that up into a paste, and you can put that on your skin for skin ailments.
What sort of skin problems are we talking here?
I only heard just skin ailments. I don't know if it's like, I guess, wingworms that people get on there and stuff like that. If we're walking in the woods and you decided, all of a sudden you didn't decide, all of a sudden you start saying, my stomach is bothering me a little bit, we would take a twig off the sweet gum and let you chew on it. And it helps soothe your stomach. If we're walking in the woods and you start saying you had a headache, what we would do is get a piece. You have ever heard of willow? Weeping willow, black willow. Get a stem, let you chew on it. The active ingredient that's in aspirin, the acylic acid that's in aspirin that gives it the kick, is in the inner bark of the willow. So you can chew on that to relieve your headache. We're walking in the woods, you get a cut. If we see a pine tree that's bleeding, we can take that sap, put on there. And it has sort of antibacterial properties, and it actually becomes like a Band-Aid, and then it starts the healing. And another good thing that everybody should have in their house, if you get a cut, yep, you got honey at home, take the honey and put on there. Okay, you suffer from sinus, where you get your honey from? Walmart, any place like that, Sous Vide, that type of thing? Okay. Wherever you live, most people who have sinus and allergies is because they're breathing something in the air, correct? Who is the collector of something in the air?
So if you eat local honey,
The closest hive that you can get to your house. Because those bees are collecting the pollen from the same plants that's setting you off. You get bitten by a snake, you go to the hospital, the first question they ask you is, what kind of snake? So that way they can give you the antidote for that particular snake. When you're collecting the honey and you take a tablespoon of that honey every day, what are you doing? You're building up your immune system. So that's where the honey is good. So always. Plus, honey never goes bad. Never. Pine needles. Green pine needles. Steep as a tea. Vitamin C. Of course, the berries from the saw palmetto. Only us men have a problem that deals with that. Prostate.
so what does that actually help specifically with?
I'm thinking it helps the swelling or reduces the problems from it.
Okay.
But a lot of people, if you go into many of the grocery stores and stuff, in their vitamin section, you'll see a bottle of saw palmetto. So, you know, that's, there it is. And I'm trying to think of something else that we can use out there. You ever heard of wax myrtle? At one time in Savannah, a lot of people were using the wax myrtle for a hedge. In the fall of the year, it has small little black berries on it, berries and seeds. And they would melt those down and make bayberry candles.
That's what bayberry candles are?
Yeah, it comes from, that's one of the ways they use it. But the leaves from the wax myrtle, you can take those leaves, crush them up, have a little odor, put them on your skin. Insect repellent. If you have dogs that stay outside, you can crush the leaves up, put in their bedding, help run the fleas and stuff. There is a plant, when you see it, and if you look at it quick the first time, and if you've ever been around a farm, you say, it looked like tobacco. But this particular plant is mullein. Some people call it lamb's ear because when you feel the leaf, it has a real fine little bristles on it, and it's real soft. You can take those, steep it into a tea, and what a lot of people have done is like take a towel and put in that solution. And if you got a bad knee or joint, wrap it. And it helps relieve the swelling. And you can even steep it as a tea and drink it for the same thing. So these are just, like I said, a little bit of some of the things that's, you know, out there. Everything to cure us is out there. We just have to learn what they are. And I have started taking pictures of a lot of plants. And if you cannot identify the picture, the very first picture, there's no need going any further than the rest of the book.
So do you have any specific advice for people who want to learn how to identify these plants?
Find someone who knows and to go out and learn. One of the ways, if you cannot find someone, the number one thing I would say is look at your survival books, look at your military survival books, and get as many, if you can talk to different native people. And it's just like the rabbit tobacco. I'm almost certain the rabbit tobacco was introduced to us by the Native Americans, who were also enslaved at one time. And so they just passed that knowledge on. And that's where that particular knowledge comes from. But the biggest thing is, and I'll tell you, like I was saying, with that very first picture, if you can't identify it, then don't go no further. The plant would have been, and the plant is, poison ivy. Leaves of 3, let it be. And it's the same thing. Okay, have you ever heard of a coral snake? What's the saying for a coral snake?
Is that the red and black one and yellow and red?
Mm-hmm.
Could you remind me, please?
Okay. You got the correct colors. Red touches yellow, kill a fella. On the coral snake, red and yellow always touching. On a scarlet king snake, same coloration, same 3 colors. Yellow, black, red, yellow. Black, yellow. No, that's still touching. They're separated. I think it's like the yellow is in between the blacks. So it's not touching the red and yellow are not touching. But red touches yellow, kill a fellow. So, plus they probably won't get any longer than about that big. And maybe the size of that walking stick. And so those are just some of the things that you have to learn to identify. There's a friend of mine that I call him a friend. We have not physically met. We've just communicated. And he is very, very good. I need to get with him about some things himself and learn. He actually goes out and pick and comes back and utilize everything he picks. It's just like the daffodils. I mean, it's a good source of food and everything else. It's like I tell people, can you eat grass?
Can. I presume it won't taste very good.
Okay, when you start eating grass, I'm gonna come and milk you. You can eat it, but the body won't process it. But you can chew grass to get the moisture out. But you don't swallow it. And like I say, with the honey, you're using that for the allergies. Plus, it has the beneficial of helping to heal. And it is a sealant. The inner skin, you ever boiled an egg and all of a sudden you start peeling it and you go from a whole egg to this little deformed thing where everything is sticking? That inner skin, do you know what to use that for?
I don't.
You ever had a rising on you or under your arm and it just will not come to a head and it just sits there and just hurt? Well, you take that inner skin from that egg and put over that rising and it will draw it to a head. And just suck it right on out. You can back in the day, they would take the eggs, they would take the shell from an egg. This is during when they had the wood burning stoves. So I guess you can do it either in a fireplace, on a gas burner, or I guess you can even do it on an electric stove. But you would take the egg, put in the fire, and let the eggshell get scorched. Take the eggshell out, steep it into a tea, drink it. And whoever you have in your house that has the issues with wetting the bed, that stops them from wetting the bed. Don't ask me how. What's the one thing many women don't like you to find in their house up in the corners?
Spiders?
Or the cobweb. We're walking, you get a small cut, take that spider web, put it around the wound. If you can find some pine tar, put that on there. You got a Band-Aid. And that's what the spider web is used for a Band-Aid. Let me see who else we got out of here. My favorite. Anyone who has a persistent cough, you want to get rid of it? If you want to get rid of it, go and find 12 cockroaches. Keep them alive. Put them in a pot of water. Bring it to a boil just to the point where they're just getting ready to pop open. Strain it and drink the tea. That is known as cockroach tea. And if you think I'm kidding, Google that tonight, cockroach tea.
That stops persistent coughs?
Yeah. Now, a little more Civilized way. There was one night I actually was coughing. I could not go to sleep. I was coughing, coughing, coughing. And at the school, every so often they give us little handouts with different little remedies. And I remember this one handout. And just so happened on the night table right by the bed was a jar of Vicks Vapor Rub. I took the Vicks, rub on the bottom of your feet. And before I could even start to rub on the second foot, I had stopped. I rubbed it on the second foot. The instructions are to put on socks and go back to sleep. Well, I didn't put on the socks, but I stayed awake for probably another 2 to 3 hours trying to see if I was going to cough. I did not cough anymore. That one did work. Vicks Vapor Rub under the bottom of your feet.
I wonder how that works.
I don't know. Now, there's one thing that I can say, and I don't know whether or not to say this or not. I don't know if many of you, but in many of the dwellings, I won't call them homes, the dwellings that the ancestors lived in during enslavement. And many times, if the female was raped, they kept cotton root, the root from a cotton plant, around. If they were caught with that, they would probably be beaten. There's a way that they use the cotton root. It would abort the baby. So that was the reason why. That was profit going out that they didn't want to have. Okra. What's the one reason why many people do not like okra?
The slime.
A lot of women use that for birth.
Very slick.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Let them slip on out of there. So, like I say, it's just these little things that people have used all over the years and stuff like that, how they came about, who knows? I don't know who the first person was that went around testing. I don't, the crash test dummy, I don't know who that was. But, it was just, somebody had to do it. And this knowledge, just like the baskets, were passed down from family to family. Like I say, my mother made sure I had the rabbit tobacco, and we would walk in the woods and she would tell me other little things. And I'll be honest with you, I really did not know how much I was, not so much how much I heard, but how much I actually kept. And like right now, I have first cousins who were born and raised in Bullock County, and they know nothing about these things. And here I am, born and raised in Savannah, and I know more about the herbal medicines and stuff than they do.
You mentioned earlier that learning about this and practicing these sort of things, you said it felt like a bit of a spiritual connection to your ancestors. Mm-hmm. So how does that, maybe not link in is not quite the right word, but how does that interact with how you would normally practice your faith?
Well, I do not consider, I don't do organized religion. And the way I look at it, and a lot of people look at me different when I say this, but you ever went out on a super, super cold winter night and there's not a cloud in the sky, and especially someplace where there are no interference from lights, and you look up in the sky and you get amazed. I didn't know there were that many stars up there. When you look at that, and if you can come away and you feel mighty, then you don't need to be here. When I go out there at that night and I see all of those stars, I see just how insignificant I am. And whatever, whoever, or whomever made all of that, I don't care what you call him, whether or not you call him God, whether or not you call him Jehovah, whether or not you call him Yahweh, whether or not you call him Buddha, Allah, whatever. Whoever made that, that's who I believe in. And to me, with organized religion is that I don't need somebody to pray for me. I can do that myself. And from my learning, you can pray for me all day. Let's just say it's just like you my best friend and I'm an alcoholic. And you can sit there and preach and preach and preach until the cows come home that I should stop drinking. It ain't gonna do no good until I decide to stop. And that's the way it is. I see religion. You can sit there and pray and pray and pray all day until I sit down and realize I need help and I'm asking, what good is it? So I have to do it. And I just, like I say, I am a loner. I do things by myself. So I don't need or I don't feel like I have to be in congregation. Well, people say, well, you need to have the fellowship. What are we doing right here? Is this not fellowship? Is this not talking about the Almighty? So why isn't this church? But you get people to sit there and say, no, we can't, this isn't church. And that's the reason why I have issues with organized. So that's where my big difference is. So, and like I tell people, it's only correct for me. I'm not trying to convert you. I'm not trying to get you to believe what I do. I'm just telling you what I see, how I see it. It's not right. It's only right for me. That's all I'm saying. And that's where I say spirituality is. Now, there's a lot of stuff floating around on Facebook and different things about the difference between religion and spirituality. A lot of people say what I've seen is religion is for those people who are scared to die. Spirituality is for those people who have already seen death. So.
Is that something that you believe in specifically?
Yeah. My thing is that there are, like I say, I can't say whether or not it's a male, female, whatever. But it may seem strange, but if you go to Yosemite and you see those massive redwoods, as smart as man is, at one time the Craig computer was the smartest and the fastest computer in the world, and as smart as that computer was, to this day it still can't tell you how the pyramids were made. And we know that's man-made. So if he can't tell you how the pyramids were made, how are you going to tell me how that redwood was made? So why is it that redwood just along that one little section of California, Oregon, is the only place they grow? But then again, we flip it around and you go into some of the swamps, you see some of those massive cypress. And out of all of that knowledge, man still can't tell you what a cypress knee is for.
Do you have any theories?
No, honestly, I mean, I can see it as a balance point to keep it solidified. And, the other thing is, well, it's a way that it get oxygen. Okay, that's possible too, but I don't know.
So something I'm curious about it. Why do you think that the Heritage Center wanted you to be interviewed?
I don't know why me particular in one sense, but then again, me particular in another sense, utilizing the African proverb. The African proverb is that when an elder dies, a library burns. So you right now, I say, are checking out books. Even though what you're doing is a project, there are some things I've said and there's things that I've expressed that you're going to take with you. Both of you. Okay, you just checked the book out. And there are things, well, just like the herbal medicine. There are not a whole lot of us who have the knowledge of the herbal medicine. There are not a whole lot of us who do make the baskets. Using another African proverb. Until the lion get a storyteller or a writer, the hunt will always favor the hunter. Have you ever heard the lion hunt from the lion's point of view? Don't have a storyteller do it. Okay. Think of me as being the storyteller for the lion. There are things that even here in Savannah, and there are people who have been born and raised here and have never left Savannah. I can drive and show you different things here in Savannah they don't know a thing about. There are people right now that have forgotten all about the milk wagon. There are people who lived in the Can Park area right now have forgotten about the day that the cows stampeded from Annette's Dairy on 53rd and Montgomery. There are people who on the corner of, and I'm gonna use the old name, West Broad, of West Broad and Henry Street, the northeast corner, used to be a pure gas station. Right across the street on the northwest corner of that same intersection was Savannah Pharmacy. On the southwest corner was a Masonic Lodge. And on the northeast corner was a bar in which the door was not on either street. It was right in the middle. Now there are people that live here and lived in that section don't remember none of that.
You said you were using the old names. What's the modern street names?
MLK. Okay, the significance of it, I don't know if you know this. When Savannah was first formed, Savannah laid within the boundary of this area. River Street, what is Bay Street now, used to be called North Broad. Oglethorpe Street, that was South Broad. MLK was West Broad.
And then in between them all was the center of the city.
Yep. All the way east was East Broad. So from South Broad to the river, within the boundaries of East and West Broad, was the metropolis of Savannah. Now, when you went to where Liberty Street is, where the Welcome Center is now, you were in the wilderness. That was the country, and that's not but 2 blocks away. But that was Savannah proper back then. And as the years have gone, they've gotten rid of the Broads. South Broad has become Oglethorpe. West Broad has become MLK. North Broad has become Bay Street. And depending on what newscaster is talking, it is only Broad Street now. They don't realize the east is not the direction. The east is the actual name. It's just like me just coming up here saying Thompson, and I don't use your first name. I'm not wrong, but I'm not correct. So it's that type of thing. And this is, I would say, this is going back to the original question. This is the reason why maybe I was used, because I bring something that is going to be a little bit different than from anyone else that they may talk to. I can remember things that a lot of other people don't remember. Perfect example, the main library of Savannah is in between 36th and 37th Street on Bull Street. Up until I was in, I'll say 7th, 8th grade, I was not allowed in that building.
And that was what year?
That would have probably been in the early 60s. We had to obtain, if we wanted to go to the library, we went to, on Henry Street, in between East Broad and Jefferson, at Carnegie Library. Okay. If you've ever gone down Ageechee Road at 39th Street, there is a gym with a swimming pool. That's Tompkins Swimming Pool. That was the only swimming pool in the city of Savannah for blacks, no matter where you lived. The swimming pool that was in Daffin Park, we as children, the only thing we could do was stand on the outside and look on the inside. We were not allowed in. So I consider myself probably of that last generation who lived Jim Crow, who can talk about it without saying I read or somebody told me. Okay, I don't go to drive-in windows. The only place I go to a drive-in window is Sonic's. Not Sonic, Rally. Because pretty much if you want served, everybody got to drive. Or unless it's 2, 3 o'clock in the morning and everybody go to a drive-in window. Why? It's because when I was growing up, if I wanted to be served at a fast food place, I had to go around the side or the back to a little window. In the front where it was cleaner and light and everything, we weren't allowed. Right here in Savannah. On the corner of Broughton and Abercorn, you got Levy's on the southeast corner. On the southwest corner of that intersection was a Woolworth. And you have this whole big bar in the cafeteria. And you had a little area like this. That was the black sitting area. At least we had one. Now the funny one, Greyhound bus station, which is now called the Gray Restaurant. I think that's what it's called. We had to go around the back in the, where you put your luggage, when you had your big luggage that you were going to ship. And it had about 1.5, 2 seats. That was the black waiting room. Couldn't go up front. The Union Station, you don't even know about the Union Station, do you? Never heard of it. Where I-16 comes across MLK. That was the train station. We could go all the way into the train station, but there was a little corner off to the side where we sat. And it didn't get any better getting on the train, because the only cars that blacks were allowed on was the very first car. So in Savannah, the trains backed into the station. So whenever we traveled by train, when we saw the train backing in, that's when we started walking, because we had, my family, we had a saying, you know, we got to walk to Pooler, because Pooler was in that direction, so you just start walking down the platform so you can get to the first car, to be ready by the time they, you know, call you your car. These are the things I remember about Savannah.
So, as somebody who's lived through the Jim Crow era in Savannah, how do you see, what's your perspective on modern politics?
There's an old saying, Grandmama said, if you can't say nothing good, don't say nothing. I won't say a lot has been done, things have been done, but there's a heck of a lot more that needs to be done. Heck of a lot more. And not only Savannah. Just, and I don't want an answer, but I just want you to think about it. We just had a trial to end within the last 2 weeks in Minnesota, Wisconsin. You know what I'm talking about, right? 17-year-old who was not even legally old enough to buy a weapon was not legally supposed to be in the streets with a weapon. Now, I'm not going to even say nothing else, just those two things there. I'm not going to even mention the shooting. My question is, and I want you to think about it, if that was a 17-year-old black male, that's all. A lot needs to be done still.
In your opinion, do you think things are moving in the right direction?
Today, after that event, it's just like I heard there's a gentleman who was down there this week, and he made the statement, this is 2021, and I really don't see any difference than 1921. Things have changed, you know, and it's kind of funny we say that this is the first time since 1968 that I've been on this campus. Do you know what happened on April 4th, 1968?
The date sounds familiar, but I couldn't tell
Okay,
you.
what did that say the name of West Broad become?
Was that the assassination?
That night, there were about, I would say 5, 6 of us from Savannah State. We met up with some students here, and we were supposed to have a party. And I don't remember whether or not where it was supposed to be, whether or not it was supposed to be at somebody's house, on campus, or where. But after that, that ended it. And I think it was about a week later, we kind of got back together, and the comment was, why isn't it everybody can't get along like we are? And that's the magic question. Why can't everybody get along? So it's just moving right along. And so, a lot needs to be done. Some things have changed. I'm not going to say whether or not it's better or not anything, but things have happened. But I would say something, but I'll leave that one.
Well, is there anything that we're hoping that we could discuss here that we haven't gotten to yet?
I actually, I enjoy what you're doing. I enjoy both of you, and No, I'll let you go. Whatever you want to ask, I'm here.
So, where do you currently live?
Walthallville.
Walton. Okay.
Yep. The big town of Walthallville. Now, you know the significance of Walthallville, right? In a lot of ways. Have you ever heard why the Gullah people? Okay, first of all, you know who the Gullah people are, right? Okay. You ever heard why they retain so much of their culture, African culture?
I know of what other historians have said.
Okay, what did they say?
So historians say that the reason that the Gullah people have maintained so much of their culture is because the rice plantations were largely just they were left alone to just do the work, and as long as the work got done, they weren't bothered as much.
Okay. Kind of, sort of. Not really. Okay. During that period of time, what were the two main illnesses that were affecting people?
Yellow fever and malaria?
Okay. Those two. Okay, how do you get malaria?
Mosquitoes.
When is mosquitoes in this area active?
Anytime it gets warm.
Yeah, but we're going to think back 100 years. We'll say what, March to October or something like that. During the years or during the time when the mosquitoes were active, the planters and their families would leave the coastal regions and go inland to a retreat, of which Walthallville was considered to be far enough inland. I don't know how in the world they considered that the way these mosquitoes eat me up. But anyway, we thinking back then. So the Africans were left with either a driver or an overseer. Overseer many times were white, drivers were black. If they were black, then that meant the community. So they continued to practice this, which is kind of almost like what he said, but it was the mosquito and malaria. One of the things that they would look for when they were picking Africans to utilize were the marks, the telltale sign, oh, they've been exposed. If it's a female, even better, because when she becomes pregnant, the antibody is already in her and she's going to pass that on to her child. So it's always the money. So that was another reason. So they looked at it that way too. So that was more the reason. That's where the term retreat came from, because they were running away from the coast. So, yeah. And it was not that the Africans could not or did not get the malaria, but they did not or could not get it at the same rate. So that was another reason for it. So. As the saying goes, that's the reason why. Do you realize that the Gullah people are the only African people who were brought here who have their own language? No one else has a language. And the language is a Creole language of whomever the predominant nation who enslaved them, and African terms. And it was a way of communicating among the people.
Do you know any other language?
Now I almost said it in Japanese, skosh, a little. I don't know how familiar you are with the migration from the South of blacks. There was a time when a lot of the blacks who migrated away from here, and you can pretty much tell people from Philadelphia, Washington, Baltimore, New York, they come from the Carolinas and Georgia. People in Chicago, Detroit, and places like that, they come from Alabama, Mississippi. That's that migration straight up. Now, every once in a while you get, some of this, but normally. And what happened is, especially from the South, from this area, it was such a stigma that when the Gullah people spoke their language, that they were ridiculed so bad that when they left, the one thing we don't want to do is crack your teeth. Not a crack your teeth?
I assume that means to talk.
To talk. Yeah. And so they would not speak the language. There are people like, I have a friend of mine who is a professor, born and raised in New York. Both of his parents are from the South, or from South Carolina. His mother will not allow, or did not allow them to basically talk about the South. Dad ended up coming back to the South. And that's that love-hate of the stigma of not wanting to be known as the South. I come from a family that pretty much stayed in the South, especially my father's side, that never discussed it. I tell people, and this is the truth, I had to become an adult and to start doing genealogy before I found out I was Gullah. If it took me that long to find out, one thing that did not happen was speaking the language. So I have picked up a little here and there. At times, depending on who's speaking, I can understand it more than I can speak it. But, I'm one of the lost ones when it comes to the language.
So around how old were you when you first
Heard
became
it.
aware that you were a descendant from Gullah folk?
Probably, I would say, within the last 20 years. Like I say, after I started doing genealogy, that's when I realized. And what happened was, actually, it's about 30 years now when I sit here and think about it. My dad and his older brother had a feud. Growing up my whole life, I knew I had an uncle that lived right there. I knew who he was, I knew his wife, I knew all the children. I had never been to his house. Never. And it was during the early 90s. I was living in Camden County, and I went to his house to see him. And we sat down and talked for a while, and that's when I found out, growing up, okay, I must say this, I don't know if you're familiar. When I grew up, I could not go to Tybee.
It was segregated?
If I wanted to go to the beach, we went down to northern Florida in Nassau County. We called the beach Ferndina. That's what we knew it as. But today the beach is known as America Beach, Black Beach. Or we went to the place right now that you would not believe, Hilton Head. At Hilton Head, there were, I think, 4 beaches, black beaches. Singleton, Burke, Collier, and the other one I can't remember, is another. Those were the 4 black beaches. That's where we went to go to the beach. There were no public black beach in Georgia in 1955. around the late 1950s, Jekyll Island. You've been to Jekyll Island? You know, when you come on the island, you come to the T, and you can go either right or left. Back then, we could only go right, unless we worked in somebody's house. Right now, where the 4-H club camp is, they got a little facility down on the right side. That was the Black Beach.
What was it called? Did it have a name, the actual beach?
They probably did. The only thing we knew was Jekyll Island. Now, I mentioned early the owner and founder of Geechee Kunda, Jim Bacote. As a young man, Jim Bacote and 3-4 of his friends, they filed a federal lawsuit. That was after it opened, when the only place you could go was right. They filed a federal lawsuit and sit there and said, why can't we use the rest of the beach when our parents are paying taxes and this is a state-run beach and we can't utilize it? Okay, today you can go in wherever you want to. And that was the beginning of the end of that in Savannah.
So he actually won the lawsuit?
They won the lawsuit, yes. Yep. And he was a teenager then when they filed that. So it's, like I say, it's been a lot of change. That's why I say in some ways, yes.
And that would have been the mid-60s?
That probably would have been early to mid-60s when that lawsuit came about. Like I say, there are differences, but we're a long way from where you would think you would be in the 21st century. I mean, I don't think no one would ever thought in the first quarter of the 21st century we're looking like we're getting ready to go back to the 1880s. And because this incident here it's going to get worse before it get better. Sadly. So. But hey, it's all on y'all now. I mean, not only just that, it's just like there are a lot of things with the environment that my generation is guilty for, and darn sure my parents' generation, that sadly we're gonna leave y'all hanging, that y'all gonna have to fix for us. So this is just another morsel that we put on y'all plate to fix, the younger generation. And that's where this is so good too, because we get to see cross cultures, and then the more you see the cross cultures, the more little pieces are chipped away. You'll see something probably today that you heard, and you sitting there saying, well, so-and-so said this, but I don't experience that. I don't feel that. So you're going, instead of it being this way here like that, even if you change that little bit like that, that's not this. You bring it about that little bit of change. And each time you see a little bit more that you can change, that's for the best. And that's where us historians are so powerful. And I wasn't going to ask this, but that CRT, what are people scared of? If it's history, what are you scared of? I may be ashamed. No, okay. I can't say it for you because in one sense I can, since my third great-grandfather. There are things he did, yes, I'm ashamed of. But all I can do is not follow in. If I'm ashamed of it and I don't like what he did, I try not to follow in his path. And you're gonna run through the same thing. I know. And the only thing I can do is hopefully I have given you something positive that you can sit there and say, no, that's not the way it is. No, so go for it. Proud of you.
Well, that's about all we have time
Okay.
for. I wanted to thank you greatly for agreeing to
No, I'm
be
sorry it took
interviewed.
me so long, but gosh, I was like, I don't know, last week was a unique thing because I was leaving so early in the morning and I was getting back around, it wasn't super, super late, but it was like dark, 7 o'clock at night. And I'm like, oh my gosh, where's the day gone? And I, s- I didn't, I really didn't see the first email. I guess I could have emailed you, but when I got home, I was just so tired. I just sat there and said, I'm not going to do nothing. So, but I had to get back to you. So, you got any question?
I think I'm good.
Okay.
Well, one formality, if you
Oh, no, 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 no. No, no, not my Hancock.
no, but if you wouldn't mind signing this release form, so that it's basically you agreeing that it's all right for us to use store this video in an archive, and so future historians can use it for papers. There are 3 copies of it to sign. One of them you can keep.
Oh my gosh. I have a disc pressed up against my spinal cord. And like right now, my fingers get that little tingle. And that's why I keep doing like that, trying to get that tingle out. Oh goodness. So what got you into history?
It was basically in high school. History was one of the only classes that I actually really enjoyed.
Oh my gosh. And I was sitting here the other day trying to think what courses did I really like. And I'm not sure what my favorite course was. And it was really funny because like the first history course I took in college, I listened to my instructor. I was like, yeah, she's full of it. She's not going to do that. And when I took the first test, I went and compared what she said, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what she said. And when it came time to take the final, she looked at me and said, oh, you don't have to take the final. Because everything I'd had ever since then was all A's. So even if I'd have completely failed it, I still had a C average.
So is your walking stick handmade?
This particular one isn't. And there's one I do have and there's one I'm getting ready to make.
One of these
That
is for
will
you.
be, okay. And what has happened with that one is that what someone did was took a bamboo plant and pulled it completely out of the ground with the root system. It just so happened right where my hand would go, it fits perfect. So it's actually a piece of bamboo that I can use. And I never thought, like I say, I've played sports my whole life, and get to the place like right now to where I was talking with a gentleman this morning, and I sat there and said, I really wish I could. I'll show you how bad it was. After I saw, because I Google map everything, like you put in there to see, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to walk from the road to here.
Mm.
And so I said, heck with it, I'm gone. But you know, that's the biggest thing I would want. The to do now is to be able just to walk some distances again. Um, when my dog was alive, we used to get up every morning. We would walk a half a mile one way to a mile, 3-4 times a day. Heck, I have problems walking from the kitchen to the bathroom. There are mornings I get up and be making coffee, and I have issues standing because I start getting aches right across my lower back, or either my knees give out. Like right now, I got bursitis in my left knee, and they said I have a major meniscus tear in my right knee. My lower back, I have issues between L1, L2, L2, L3, L3, L4, L4, L5, L5, S1.
What caused these issues?
Probably me being stupid growing up, because that when I played baseball, I'm not going to say this did it, but I know it didn't help it. I call myself trying to stretch. And something long years ago, I always knew I would have back issues, because I was always trying to stretch my back out. And you know, like on the softball fields, they have the bleachers, maybe about 7-8 rows of metal. I would go to the top, and I would sit on the top row, take my feet, and lock up under that one, and I would bend back as far as I could. And then I would pull myself back up. And like I say, now I realized that I wasn't helping my back. And I think that may be some of it. My back is so messed up, and the discs have collapsed in such a way that in that lower part of my back, I have a slight curve. What this is in my neck, I don't know what that is. All I know is that I have a disc that's pressed up against my spinal cord. And that's the reason why I have slowed down on my basket making, is because when I do a stitch and I pull, I like to hold it tight and then go, and I can't hold this. Like I was telling a friend of mine last night, we hadn't seen each other in a while. I was working out of a Hardee's one day with a steak biscuit in my hand walking, and I got to the car and didn't realize the bag had slipped out of my hand. I didn't feel it. I was turning around, there's darn bags in the parking lot. But you know, I have a saying that I used to tell all of my students: out of every negative, find something positive. And I would use the example, I would take one of the largest males in the class, and I'll sit there and call the name of one of the smallest kids in the school. I said, you walked up to that kid and say, hey, little man, how you doing? And little man jumped up and knocked you slap out on your back out. I said, there's something positive to learn. Don't call him little man, how you doing? You know. You know, so it's that type of thing. And it's just like with my back and everything. And it's like what I tell people. I said, the good thing about having pain when you wake up in the morning, you know you woke up. Because there are many people who did not have any pain, didn't wake up this morning. So that's the philosophy according to Greg.
So, you mentioned playing baseball. That was in Savannah?
I played Little League. That was something else. I played on probably some. I played on probably the earliest Little League baseball teams there were in Savannah. Since my dad worked at that particular time, he worked at the paper mill. It's International Paper now, but at that time it was called Union Bag, and it was Union Bag, UBAA, Union Bag Athletic Association. They sponsored our uniforms. That was the only thing they did for us, they just bought those one set of uniforms. At that time, it was Can Park, Yamacraw had a team. Boys and Club, I think it was just a boys club then. Springfield, which is on Stiles Avenue, they had a baseball team. And there were one or two others, I can't remember what they were. And we had about 5 fields that we played. There was a field behind what is the old Durin Elementary on 52nd Street, Ogeechee Road. We played ball there. We played ball on Can Park. There was a field that was called the Flamingo Field, which is on Stiles Avenue, because used to be a nightclub there called the Flamingo. So there was a Flamingo Field, and there were some 1 or 2 fields, and I get confused about exactly where. There was one called Coke Field. It was on property right by the Coca-Cola plant, and there was another field someplace else, and we bounced around playing ball that way. And that we were, like I said, one of the first ones to play there. And so I played there. I played a hot second in high school until I got hurt. I messed up my ankle, so that went my high school baseball career. And then when I went in service, I played slow pitch. Well, I started off fast pitch, and then I went to slow pitch. And then when I was in Japan and Guam, I played semi-pro football. And then once I got out of service I lived when I was up in Oak Ridge in Knoxville area, oh gosh, 3, 4, 5 nights a week played ball. We played slow pitch. We had a league, a plant league that played 2 nights a week, and sometime Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And if we won Sunday, we'd play all of those days. So baseball I played my whole life, all my life. And then I went from there to shooting competitive archery. After I learned which side I should shoot from. Okay, you right or left-handed?
Right-handed, left eye.
Okay, see, you and I got the same problem. Any shooting you do, you should do it left-handed.
Yeah, but it feels so weird, so it's hard
Okay.
to get in the habit of doing that.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's what I did. I was shooting right-handed, and something happened, and we had a regional tournament, which is called the Southeastern because of this region. I shot the Southeastern right-handed, and we had a week in between the Southeastern and the National. And when I came home from the Southeastern, I just so happened had a left-handed bow, and I put it down. I picked up the left hand and put down the right, and the type of arrow rest I had was very soft. So I picked the bow up and I pulled back, and I did not pull through that arrow rest. And I was like, yes, I can do it. Well, when I went to the Nationals, you shoot in a group of 4. The first day they put me with the wives, 3 wives of 3 pro shooters. And these ladies were keeping all of their arrows in a nice little group like this. My target, National, looked like I shot it with a shotgun. I bought the target, I could shoot it where I wanted. I had arrows all over the place. And I could just feel these women when we were going to score arrows, like, darn, if he can't shoot no better than this, why is he here? So we got to talking, and I sat there and said, well, last week I shot right-handed. This week I changed to left-handed. You sure are shooting good, because one lady said, I don't think if I'd have switched like that, I would be able to keep the arrows in the building. So, it's just, and like I say, once I change, you stay stagnant, you hit a peak, and then all of a sudden you come up. And when I came up, I just started winning. And from that, I am a 9-time state of Georgia champion. I'm a 4-time Southeastern regional champion. I'm a 1-time national champion, and I came in 7th in the world once. So,
Prolific.
so I've done that a little bit. So, like I say, I enjoy shooting, and now shooting. And a lot of people, even with guns, a lot of people can understand that it's soothing, it's relaxing. And with the guns, people can't understand because all they're listening is at the noise. Whereas with a bow, it's so much different. Like my stepdaughter, when we practice, I say, you're not in no rush to shoot an arrow. I don't care how long it takes you to shoot an arrow. Do not release the arrow until everything is right. One of the hardest things for an archer to do is to be at full draw and then to let down. That's hard because your mind say, you can do it, shoot, 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 and you let it go and arrow go anywhere. And she had been there about 20, 25 minutes, had not released the arrow. And she kept trying to get her feet together, kept on. So finally she just completely moved and she shot bullseye. Beautiful arrow. And I started laughing. And she was like, what's the matter? I said, you? She's like, what? I said, you don't know what you just did. You don't know why you were so uncomfortable. She said, no. When she took that step back, I saw what it was. And if I wasn't there, I wouldn't have believed it. She had one dry pine needle under her back foot. And she wasn't balanced. When she would move like this, just move up and down, it was still there, so it wasn't balanced. But when she completely moved, she got away from it. I said, that's what I'm talking about. And when you're that in tune that you can do something, oh, that's beautiful. I used to shoot inside my house. I could shoot, 15 to 17 yards in my house. I would shoot from the living room through the kitchen into the utility room. Normally it would be nobody home. If my stepdaughter was home, she would have to come from behind me and she would see me shooting, and plus she could stay that way and go around and go into the kitchen without, coming to where I was. But I would shoot in the house. You can shoot archery this close here, as you and I. When you shoot this close, you're not shooting for accuracy. You're shooting for muscle memory. And at that close, you can come up and shoot with the eye closed. When you shoot with the eyes closed, you truly feel the shot. Because once you take the eyes out, then you can, all the other senses become good. I loved archery. Just so happened I can't shoot now, left-handed, don't have no feeling. So, moving right along.
One quick
Yep.
thing. So, did you actually attend a lot of baseball games when you were younger in Savannah? Or did you just play in the little leagues?
Attend, like, what you mean, like the Savannah team?
Yeah, because another grad student is researching the black leagues,
Okay.
the Negro leagues as they were called.
Okay, but here's the thing about it. Can Park on Sunday nights, on Sunday afternoons, that's where they played. You had the Savannah Kilowatts, which was the Can Park team. You had the Sportsman Park Bears. You had the Sandfly or Pinpoint Blue Jays. You had the Ridgeland, something, I can't forget what they were. You had the Brooklet from Bullock County, Rough Riders, and there was Allenhurst. Allenhurst. They were the Blue Devils. Because if you've ever come up 84 where the ball field is, right there at the railroad track going into just past Walthallville, just before you get to the first curve going into Hinesville, there's a ball field. That's where they used to play it. That's where the Allenhurst Blue Devils played at. They were there, and yeah, so we had a guy that played with the Kilowatts. Pitcher. There was no need putting a switch hitter in there for him. If you always want to go left, right. So you put a left-handed pitcher in there because he's right-handed, he just change the glove and throw left-handed. He could throw with either hand. And so, and he was the only person I knew that did that. Only person. So I know a little bit about some of the games and stuff because I saw so many of them on Sundays. Yep.
Would you mind if I gave your information to the grad student? Maybe he can come talk to you
Okay.
in detail about it.
No problem. Hey, I don't have no problem. Like I say, this is, what did I say? When an elder dies, what happened? We got to get as many as y'all to check these books out. So, hey. I mean, what I'm talking about, my history, guess what? That's yours too. Because you didn't and couldn't experience it, it does not mean that you can't learn about it. And that's what we're doing. And the more we learn about whatever and each other, that's where our changes come. So where I can, next time I say, yeah, it's changing, other than, things are, but yep. So,
Well, thank you.
yep. Appreciate it.